Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JustKnowTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another episode of Extra Time. This is just what I called the additional show that I'll usually do after the daily download when something else happens that we're not going to talk about in that particular show. So obviously, I did a full overview of everything that's going on with the transfer window. So this show is not going to really be about that. So if you have questions around, the transfer window or want to know what's going on, what's the most recent news, you can watch the most recent daily download after this because I'm sure you're going to want to stick around for this. Sulz and I are actually going to be going through the major points of Adu's most recent interview, which personally, and I think a lot of Arsenal fans felt this way, is that was probably one of the most not eye-opening, but honest interviews that I've seen somebody from the club actually do. And it brought a lot of light to what Arsenal's ambitions are, some parts of the transfer window and understanding a little bit more what the dynamic with that was, kind of how Adu got here and the choices that the club has had to make over the last couple of years to get us to where we are now. And so I wanted to discuss that. Obviously, bringing in a guest is always so much better because we can get different insights. So that's why I chose to bring in Sulz for this. And so, yeah, we'll just go through everything. And I want to get you guys in the chat box letting me know what you guys are thinking as well. And yeah, we know here on SheKnowsArsenal, we're going to keep it 100% real. This is not a echo chamber at all. Feel free, to say exactly how you feel as long as it's, respectful. You know what I'm saying? There's 60 of you guys in here already, which is amazing. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in Sulz. Hey, Sulz.
Hey Jess, how you doing?
I'm good. I cannot complain. So we have an interview to go over. I would say that this is probably the best interview that somebody working at the club has done over the last couple of years. I know Arteta's done a couple, Adu's done one or two before this, and Vinay has done some. But, this feels different. This feels like, a lot more in depth and so honest and just from the heart a little bit, and so, and you kind of seen little bits of that over this transfer window in general, because I do feel like having somebody like Frimpong for example on the tour, just almost like a fan, just going day to day, actually getting access to the players, them actually allowing AFTV to be in and amongst what's going on with the club. Things are changing, and I think they're using the media as an opportunity to open themselves up to the fan base, which is exactly what we asked for, right? Do you enjoy when the club is open and honest, or do you feel like some things they should just keep to themselves?
A bit of both. I think there are certain internal issues which need to, like the disciplinary things. For example, in the All or Nothing, when we're seeing, was it Cedric? The issue is it looks like Cedric and Lacazette are fighting each other, but things like that we don't need to hear about, especially during a season when things maybe are a bit rocky. I think that
Mm-hmm.
can be sort of, you deal with it. We don't need to know. But things like what they have done, where they've allowed, and Sessa was a big part of from AFTV, who's been asking the questions and stuff. I feel it's brilliant because journalists don't know what we want to know. Like, as fans, we want to know what's happened to Tomiyasu and Kieran Tierney, what's happening there, how far along are they? Especially Tomiyasu seems to be a myth at the minute. Like, where is he? Like, what's happened to him? And it's good that these questions are being asked. And I think even the interview, for me, it was the most honest and open and transparent. There was no political answers. It was whatever was asked. Obviously, I'm not going to say any quotes or anything, but whatever was asked was answered. And it was probably one of the biggest eye openers, like you said, other than the All or Nothing, which is going to come out soon. And also on that, I like the fact that people who, I know it's a bit of a, some people are going to say, well, it's unfair, but I stand by what I'm going to say. The fact that people who attend the majority or all of the home games last season are getting an opportunity to go and watch All or Nothing, like a premiere for 2 episodes, like 2 days before. And I think stuff like that, where you're giving back to the fans who are supporting and are paying a ridiculous amounts of money for tickets and season tickets, is brilliant. I think I like it. I'll be honest, without giving too much away what was said, I like everything so far, what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I like that there was no sugarcoating, and he was saying a lot of the things that we all kind of think or had assumed. Like one of my favorite parts was when he just kind of started off by saying, like, when he first got there, everybody was comfortable, and he's like, what the hell is this? Like, this is not what Arsenal is about. We should be fighting for things. Everybody's too comfortable. And I do think you got a sense about Arsenal early on when Adu was there, Raul, even Ivan Gazidis, like that time, they were just like doing whatever. It didn't seem like there was a direction. They were saying things, but their actions were saying something different. And so now I do feel like there is a push to try to get going in the right direction. They've made mistakes, like we all know that. But in general, I do feel like there's more emphasis, there's more energy like in and around the club, and you can kind of feel it. And everybody that's in and around the club does talk about there's a different vibration there. And something else that I really do like about Adu, and everybody knows I've been really harsh on him, but one thing that I do like is that when I saw him with, I think it's Cecil and Lee Judges, is that he was like, "Oh, you're always very critical, but I like that. Thank you. I like that you guys tell the truth." And I'm like, okay, so they just don't want people out here, like they know that this club has been in the mud for years now. So they're not about to tell fan media not to say the truth. And I think it's important for them to listen to the fans in certain capacities, because really, without the fans, you have nothing. And so do you find that level of like not shutting down the fans and trying to shelter everybody from the negativity, but almost trying to look like almost address the issue? What are they saying? Okay, they're saying that they need more communication. Cool. They're saying that we need to fight for titles. Cool. We'll work towards that. Do you think that that's just a better way of doing things, where it kind of felt like they were shut off from the fans a little bit before?
100%. I think one of the biggest things, especially, well, you can say since Edu's come in, and obviously Vinay's, I'm guessing his role overlaps in this, and the communication since COVID has been better than ever. We understand what Josh wants. Obviously, he seems to be the liaison from the owners in terms of Stan's clearly not a big role in this. He's just someone who's going to pump the money in, but it's Josh's project. This is his child to sort of do what he wants to do and how he wants to take it forward. And I think that's kind of what's happening. I think he's taken the reins of the Cronkies, and I'm not to make it morbid, but obviously Stan's coming of age and he's probably going to retire, or he can't be bothered doing a lot of the operations. So Josh is taking over, and you can see that whatever he's doing in America, he's bringing it over to Arsenal, bringing a young, full of personalities and different levels of experience and ability. And he's bringing that over, and he's bringing that mentality over to Arsenal. Granted, it's taken a long time, but I always say you can only judge owners from 100% ownership. I don't feel shareholders, and when you've got this sort of messy two, basically egos clashing with each other in which way they want to go forward. I think since 100%, they've proven to us that it's not even care, but they do want Arsenal to succeed, and they're trying to do it in a way they want to do it. Now, when we look at, like, for example, Sven, he didn't get on board, Raul didn't get on board with the way they want to operate and how they want to bring success forward. They got sacked, like as simple as that. No questions asked. We didn't really need to know what the ins and the outs were for that. And Edu's on board, Vinay's on board, Arteta seems to be on board. So they've clearly got a direction. They've clearly listened to the fans. Now, obviously, like you said, to a capacity. Now, a lot of people want Arteta gone. It's probably in their best interest not to sack him yet, because in their heads, or in their sort of map or road map to success, they're seeing it like, okay, we need to be here by this point, and that's where we are. So why sack him? And they're right in what they say. If we sack Arteta, we're taking the project back. And it's not that the project is reliant on him. It's just more in the case of we need to get it to a position. Then let's evaluate Arteta properly. Like, for example, this season, he's been backed enough, I think, to for him to like push on now and get solidify top four, get us Champions League football. If not, then questions need to be asked about, is he the right man to take us forward? And I think so far they've answered every question, because there's very less fans I'm seeing on the timeline. There's always going to be one or two, but that are really pessimistic. That a lot more optimism is being shown. Maybe it's just who I'm seeing on Twitter, or maybe the time I'm going on Twitter. But I'm yet to come across very negative takes, and that's credit to them because they've listened to us and they've tried to address as much as they can. But there's still work to be done. But the window's still open.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're pretty, like, I would say I think that the majority of the fan base is pretty together at the moment. Obviously, we're not playing games right now, or we're playing preseason games, we're playing well, so everybody's excited. We know that that can change at lose to Crystal Palace and it's all up in the air again, but right now it does seem like everybody's pretty together. And what I do like is it seems like everybody at Arsenal is singing from the same hymn sheet. And it doesn't feel forced or anything like that. But let's go through some of the main points. There's 150 of you guys in here, which is great. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Now, this was interesting to me because I love transfers, not just because I want the players to come in, but I like to know what I would love to just sit down with an agent and say, okay, show me your WhatsApp. I want to see what that looks like, because that's how deals are done. I don't know if people think it's being done by whatever, snail mail, whatever. It's not. It's literally done on WhatsApp. I would love to know what agents are saying, how clubs contact players, all that type of stuff, because it's so interesting to me. So Adu kind of talking about Raphinha, he said, I just said to Deco, you can explain to me the situation with Raphinha. And he was clear. Adu, we have a good relationship, but I'm not going to lie to you. His idea is to go to Barcelona because he's dreaming of going to Barcelona, and we've been talking to Barcelona since a long time ago. Okay, thank you very much. If something happens, and this is Adu talking to Deco. Okay, thank you very much. If something happens, then just let me know because I can explore and understand the situation. If not, no problem. We carry on with this relationship. And so, I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, so that doesn't sound too bad, right? You ask to know the situation. And I do think from the very beginning, for everybody, it was really clear that Raphinha wanted to go to Barcelona. And Arsenal were only really in the running for him under the assumption that Barcelona was not going to be able to come up with the money. And then they were able to get it. And honestly, I don't think the reaction to this would have been as bad had Chelsea had not jumped in. Like, if you really think about it, if it had just been, okay, Barcelona comes up with the money and they take him, nobody, I don't think, would have had a negative thing to say. But because it was Chelsea and it felt like your rival was hijacking you, which ultimately was funny because they didn't actually end up with him either, it was something that I do think turned from a lot of excitement to, okay, what are we doing? This is kind of embarrassing. I just want to get from your perspective, like, do you think that Adu played the Raphinha saga down in this whole, in this interview, or do you think that what he was saying was actually true? Like, we weren't as in for him as maybe people were thinking, I have a follow-up question to this. So let me just hear what you got to say for that.
The truth is, I don't believe any media talk anymore because everyone's got their own take and everyone seems to have their own information. Some say we put a bid in. Some said we're contemplating putting a bid in. So it's very difficult to really know who to trust in these situations because we have been moving very quiet in the market in terms of no journalist has a concrete idea of who the players are. And I think that's the same with the Raphinha situation. Of course, journalists want to hype up a player, and that's probably why they said we did put a bid in, or we put an official bid of, was it 55 million or something of that kind of nature. But for me, I kind of do believe this because every club, especially in the modern day, tends to find out what's happening, what's the player saying. They speak to them and kind of get a soft agreement in place with the player before they go and put a bid in. So if this is the situation, let's say Raphinha is like, no, my heart's on Barca, and then Edu's like, look, if obviously we know the situation, it's not a Real Madrid situation where the money can happen. Barcelona is a very 50-50 place at the minute in terms of can they get these deals done, or do they have to wait to get the funds or whatever the situation there is? And it could have been that Barcelona turned around and go, look, we were banking on Leeds being relegated, and that's all we've got. So we can't actually spend the 60 million that Leeds won. So unfortunately we can't go in for you, which then opens the door for the Chelsea and Arsenal and whoever to sort of come in for him. I don't think clubs are that stupid to go in for a player that doesn't want to come or we don't know the situation. So I don't think he's played it down. Maybe he has to a degree, but I do think it's probably along these lines. Because if, let's say, Barca never put their interest in, then this is playing it down. But we knew he wanted Barca and Barca wanted him. So both sides of the parties wanted each other. And in that sense, you just kind of find out, go, okay, let us know. If the situation changes, then we'll do something. So that's how football transfers happen, in my opinion. So, yeah, I kind of do believe it because of how transfers are done.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I do think like, at a certain point this felt embarrassing. And I think it was just like an emotional response to Chelsea coming in and then Manchester United coming in on Lisandro Martinez. One minute we think those are the two players that we're getting, the next minute they're not coming to us. So there was a level of like emotional reaction, at least from me, feeling like, what have we done? Why did we go in for players that never really wanted to come to us? Things like that. I do think that there's probably a level of him playing this down. I do think that this is generally the reality. And like, also, if they ask you about it, if Deco's your friend, or Deco's somebody that you want to keep sweet, you're not going to go out there and say, actually, yeah, like, Deco kind of led me on a little bit and said, there was less, Barcelona probably aren't going to come up with the money. So go ahead and let us know what you would pay. What are the personal terms looking like? Go ahead and put in an offer to Leeds, talk to them about what you pay, things like that, to get things going so that Deco could use that in order to try to push Barcelona to go ahead and put in a bid. I do think it was something more on the lines of that. We knew his interest was strong at Barcelona, but I do think that Arsenal probably did believe that there was not that big of a chance of Barcelona coming up with the money, and Deco was probably feeding him that, but at the same time, I look at it and I think this is why it's so important for Arsenal fans to remember that, Ornstein is the reason why a lot of people believed the Raphinha news. It's because he was the main one pushing it. And I'm not saying he's not reliable, but what I'm saying is he gets information from agents as well. And when you think about the way that things went from him saying, oh, we're putting in our second bid for Raphinha to, oh, overnight, Chelsea are leading the race and they put in a formal bid and blah, blah, blah. Ornstein was definitely being fed from Deco. That's what I really do think. I think he had the information and both us and Chelsea were used, but if it comes down to it, do you think that, because, Edu does talk about later on in the interview, and we'll talk more about this, in terms of like wanting to bring in players that want to come to Arsenal and things like that for the right reasons. Do you think he should maybe avoid some of these types of scenarios though? Like if he knew that, this was the reality, that he really wanted to go to Barca, why even pursue it at all? Do you think that it was a risk worth taking or something we could have avoided altogether?
I mean, it's an opportunity, isn't it? I mean, we'd be angry at the club for not at least trying their luck, because there is a world where Barcelona don't come up with the money, and their financial situation is probably a little bit worse than they're making it out to be. So, if we haven't gone in for him, we've kind of just wasted an opportunity, and we could have got a worse player. So, I'm a bit 50-50, to be honest. I think once you find out, like, let's say this is the situation, then yeah, back off and just let the thing happen. But if he continues going in and we waste the entire window trying to pursue Raphinha and then he ends up at Barcelona, which is what we all know, then it's a problem. But I think for how long the saga went on for, or how long it perceived to go on for, it's fine. Like, it was a week or so. I don't think that takes away too much. And I think it happened at the right part of the window where there's still plenty of time to go get your pre-Raphinha plan A, or whoever we decide we wanted to sign, but we didn't sign because Raphinha became available. So yeah, as long as you're not wasting too much time and you're just dilly-dallying for a month, then it becomes a problem. But I think it was a week or maybe two at most, and it happened in the middle of the window. So there's plenty of time either way to
It
sort
didn't
things out.
cost us anything, right?
Yeah,
Like, ultimately, it didn't cost us anything, right? Like,
yeah.
I do get that. Like, sometimes I do just think, like, it's kinda hindsight to be like, "Don't ever go for a player that you know doesn't wanna come here," but, sometimes you do have to take that risk, right? Phyllis says, "Honestly, Deco and Edu got personal relationship from Brazil days, so on. You honestly think he would lie and jeopardize a home country relation with someone he knows from faceless Twitter?" So, here's the reality is that Deco needs to do what's best for his client, Raphinha. Edu and his relationship, that doesn't mean that there's any bad blood. Like, Edu is the football industry is cutthroat. That's the reality. Deco using our interest is not something that's going to keep Deco and Edu from being cordial. We also don't know how deep their relationship is, but we know that they have some sort of relationship. Deco also used a club that he played for in order to get this deal done for Raphinha in Chelsea. So this is just the game. So I don't really think that like the reality of like their relationship being home countrymen or whatever is more important to Deco than making sure that he gets Raphinha where he wants to go and also making sure that he gets his percentage because that's his job. So in the end of the day, I'm sure Edu understands that this is his job. And if he feeds a little bit of information to Ornstein and Ornstein blows it up, that's just what it is. This is the world that they live in. So I don't think that he was jeopardizing the relationship or anything like that. But I think you're also kind of overplaying the idea that Deco and Edu's relationship is more important than the percentage that he'd be getting for the Raphinha sale. I mean, that's his job, right? Do you have a different take on that before we move on, or what do you think?
Not business is business, you know. There's no,
Yeah.
this is the thing, people know this. Like, there's no friendship in business, and this, when it's an agent and a club talking, there's no friendships, there's no personal relationship. Yeah, it can help, but it's still business.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Yeah, it's very this is the kind of stuff that I really like to know. Like I'm very interested in like what are the little ploys that they go through in order to try to get these deals done because Deco worked hard to get Raphinha at
Mm.
Barcelona. That's the truth. He really did. So, yeah, I'm glad to know more about that situation. I do think he played it down, but it is what it is. So moving forward, Adu talked about firing Emery, and he said, with all due respect, the plan started really when we decided to change Unai Emery. That was my first planning to go to the board and to explain to them the reason why we wanted to change, the reason we wanted to go in a different direction. The idea behind it was to have a coach with a very clear idea, a very clear plan, a very clear structure, how he wants to play. And from that, we're going to build something together. Um, we had to be really brave to make that decision in the middle of the season. Internally, people said to me, wow, we never did that before. We did that a long, long time ago. I said, no problem. But if you had already diagnosed it's not our plan, change as soon as possible. Otherwise, you're going to postpone, postpone, postpone. In football, sometimes the decision has to be made quickly. It hurts, it's challenging, but it has to be done. You know, I look at that and I say, like, yeah, one, if my first job at Arsenal is to fire Emery, I'm like, damn, that's a tough first assignment. But I remember those days, like, it was very like tumultuous. It was already in the stadium. Once it gets to the stadium and you can kind of get a sense that the fans are not into the manager anymore, you have a problem. And Emery just wasn't right for Arsenal. I think that that was pretty clear. And so Adu and the board, made that decision, mid-season and things like that. When I guess my thing with this is just like, and I guess this will go into the Arteta conversation because he talked about hiring Arteta and how he liked, his vision and his plan and all this kind of stuff. From your perspective, I think we've kind of spoken about this before, but was there a world where we could have gotten a manager that was kind of like organized and had a plan and stuff like that, but didn't have no experience whatsoever. I think at that time also like Ancelotti was available and things like that. Do you think we had to go in this direction? Was Arteta just the only and best option? Or could we maybe look for somebody with a little bit more experience? Do you think that was a risk that Edu needed to take?
It's always tough because if you look at the Ancelotti situation, the first opportunity he got, he jumped ship to Real Madrid. So sometimes, you know what, the grass isn't always greener just because we get the better manager. And you also need to look at your situation and hire for the situation. And more experienced managers are going to have their way of doing things. And it seems to us that the club want to do what the club wants to do together. They don't want like Ancelotti coming in and saying, look, this is what I want, because that's not a project. That's not a long-term building success. Like, this is why I said when people sat there and go, oh my God, Spurs got Conte, this, that, the other. I was like, the problem with Conte is he's not going to build. He's going to build for his time. Whatever happens after his time, he couldn't give a shit. Like, he will leave you with bridges burned, with the fans in despair, and he wouldn't care. He just doesn't. Whereas with certain managers want to leave the club in a better state they found them in. And it's always going to be one of those situations. Like, this is such a hard one to answer because it's clear to us that Arteta wants to do what's good for Arsenal, and that, despite, we'll have to find out because obviously Pep's at City at the minute, but despite all the interest from Barcelona, from him being mentioned to Man City and everything like that, he's still stayed loyal to Arsenal, and he hasn't flirted with the idea of going to another club. I know he's never going to say that whilst being employed, but it's clear to us that both parties want each other to succeed, and they're clearly working together. And if you look at even the culture change, like let alone results on the pitch for a second, you can definitely see if you don't want to play or you don't want to perform and you don't want to win, you don't really last long at the club anymore. Like Aubameyang gave up, he's out. Guendouzi decided to be a brat, out. Ainsley decided he didn't want to play where Arteta told him to play, gone. Bellerin, same situation. His mentality, wasn't of, what Arteta wants, gone. So I think sometimes we don't realize what goes into these recruitment processes and what Arteta said. And even if you look at his non-negotiables, Edu clearly, even when we, look at his interviews, has said that it's so like the culture was relaxing. No one really seemed to care about winning, or they were really relaxed. It was a retirement home. We were signing players over 30, etc., etc. But Arteta's clearly come in and said, look, none of that's going to go. Like, we're not doing none of that now. We're not going to be that club. So in hindsight, I think he's done the right thing. Obviously, we're going to sit there and go, if an Allegri or Arteta, we're going to go Allegri. If Ancelotti, Arteta, we're going to go Ancelotti. But we've seen these scenarios play out. Look at Allegri at Juventus now. He's struggling, regardless of team and everything. So sometimes I do say to fans, it's not always greener. So, because even Ancelotti with Everton didn't do that well. So, and I know it's Everton, and I understand their team isn't that great, but he jumped ship. He could have done that with us. He could have left us in the middle of a project and gone to Real Madrid, and then we're back to square one. So I think you need to get whoever it is, that manager needs to be on board to know that, okay, you need to give this 4 seasons or whatever, and he's got to be willing to stay loyal for that period at least. So, and I think out of the options, Arteta's probably going to be the most loyal because he's got no experience, and he's going to be like, thank you for the opportunity. I'll stick and I'll stay and I'll see this out.
Do you think there's any legs to them? We got him because he was the cheap option.
Yeah, I don't disagree entirely with it because he's probably the easiest to negotiate because he's an assistant manager. He's not a manager. He's not maybe a sought after manager either. So it's probably the easiest to get done.
The one thing that I do disagree about when people say like, talk about the Arteta hiring and the motivation behind it is him being a yes man. I don't necessarily view Arteta as a yes man. I think he's going to put on the face, that he needs to in front of people in order to, toe the party line. But I think he's pushing for things behind the scenes. I just don't see Arteta being somebody that's like, yeah, it's okay to be mid-table. Yeah, it's cool. Like, I don't see that, so even though I do think there's probably financially motivated as well as, wanting to bring in somebody who had the right ethos and the right ideas. I don't think it was motivated by the idea that he was just going to be a pushover. That's not necessarily, the idea that I get from him. But what he said on hiring Arteta was, when I met Mikel, I went to his house. We had a great relationship straight away, conversations, ideas, etc. Then I see this guy has a plan, a football plan, the style, players, characteristics, very technical points, how he wants to play, people inside or external, how we're going to press. It's a lot of technical stuff. And he showed me he has a very clear idea of how he wants to play football, which again helps the decisions. Now we are going to make the club's life easier. We know that Arteta is a very meticulous, obsessive type of guy. Most top managers are. Like, that's not anything new, but it's something that you definitely want from a manager. And we know from day one, he was very honest and clear about what he wanted to see. And I like the funny thing about this, and just to go back a little bit, is that I always go back to his first interview at Arsenal when he was saying that, like, he wanted to have the ball in the opposition's half as much as possible. He wanted to play attacking football. He wanted to entertain. He wanted to possess the ball, score lots of goals, and all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't too long ago where I was looking at the way that we were playing, and I was like, okay, I'm not seeing that. Now we kind of see it, don't we? Now we kind of see we're pushed right up to the halfway line. We're in the opposition's half. We're controlling the narrative of the game. Do you think we're right on the edge of what Arteta was talking about in that first interview? While you're talking, I'm gonna actually find it, because I actually think that's a good way to show like how far we've come, because it was not too long ago where I was like, we're not doing none of this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's impossible for a manager to implement his system without players. Like, even if you look at Pep Guardiola, and I know people are going to say, well, they're two different managers, two different experiences, etc. But if you put Pep at the same time as Arteta, it'd probably take him just as long if you're looking at the expenditures. Now, even Pep would need like 250 to 300 million pounds straight away to be able to implement those ideas. Now, when you look at granted it's a friendly, and granted Chelsea were absolute dog shit, but the way we played against them in this friendly game showed us exactly what Arteta's trying to implement and trying to do over a period of 38 games. He wanted to pin them back. He wanted to keep them in their half. We press space. We basically looked like we had extra men on the pitch because of how much we suffocated the space. He's finally got that, in Benjamin White and Saliba to recover if when we play the high line. They've both got the pace. They've both got the strength and the ability to recover on any sort of player. Like, we've seen Saliba even recover on Mbappe, who is arguably one of the fastest footballers in the world right now. So now that the pieces are falling into place for him, we're starting to see those ideas actually come to fruition. The only problem is we're still an injury away from things falling apart, which is always going to be the case until you bolster the squad. It's the same with Klopp at Liverpool. His ideas aren't going to show if Van Dijk's injured or Salah's injured, or because the drop in quality from those players to who they have next is exponential. So as long like Partey needs to be fit, for example, now Kieran Tierney doesn't matter as much because we've got Zinchenko who can cover there or come into midfield depending on the situation. So that's the only worry. But I do think we're starting to, because I compared it. I even said what that Chelsea game reminded me of was Pep Guardiola's Barcelona. It was that 9-second rule. You've got 9 seconds to win that ball back. And you know what? It was quite biblical in a sense of that all or nothing trailer came out and he was like, you're losing your duels, you're losing the ball, you're not winning the ball back. And then the very next game, what do we see? Them literally losing the ball and straight on it. How did the Jesus goal happen? We were straight on it. We pressed them into a mistake. And then obviously the rest was history. And like every single goal had that element in it where it was relentless. Like I know I keep saying Chelsea were crap, but we made them crap because we just didn't let them do anything. Mason Mount's their outlet, and what did we do? We didn't let him get the ball. We didn't let the ball go to him. So we are. But like a lot of people have said, we're a party injury away, which is the worrying thing. Like, because I mean, it's El Neni coming in, and unfortunately, I do like El Neni, but not for a
No, you
90
love
minute
El
or
Neni. Stop it.
yeah.
You're playing it
No, no,
down.
I do love El Neni, but not in a
You love
sense of
him.
I want to have him for 5, 6, 7, 8 games. I want him to
Nobody wants that.
yeah, like I don't mind him coming in for a game or just sort of rotating. I don't mind that, but not playing like half the season because that's
No,
not his
yeah.
role.
I get that. And like we do know that we're still a work in progress and we can all highlight exactly where we need to go. Need another attacker, need somebody that can deputize for Thomas Partey, need somebody that another a central midfielder, probably need a right back. Like we all kind of know the positions that we need to cover, but I did find it. I always go back to this. I don't know why I don't have it saved on my phone or something. But this is like his first thing. I remember he started, "My philosophy will be clear." I remember that. And his hair was like perfect. It was crazy. He looked also 10 years younger because this job wears you down. So he said, "My philosophy will be clear. I will have everyone at 120% committed. That's the first thing. If not, you don't play for me. When it's time to work, it's time to work. And when it's time to have fun, I'm the first one to do it. But that commitment is vital. When I want, then I want the football to be expressive, entertaining. I cannot have a concept of football where everything is based on the opposition. We have to dictate the game. We have to be the ones taking the initiative and we have to entertain the people coming to watch us. I'm 100% convinced of those things. I think I can do it." And so I look at that and I was like, I've been waiting for a long time to see that football. A long time from the beginning, Arteta being here. And what's so funny is that for the longest time, even sometimes last year, we were pretty boring and didn't look like scoring. You add a Gabriel Jesus into this team, your players get a little bit older, you have your starting 11 and all of a sudden we look a lot more entertaining. We look like a better attacking side, so I do think we're getting closer to what his philosophy is, and I do think that that speaks to the entire club working towards that philosophy from the moment that they brought Arteta in. It's been a very difficult journey. We all know that we've been through hell and back, but it finally looks like that vision is starting to become a lot more clear, and it's not as gray. So, Arteta or Edu was talking about selling players. And he said, for me, there are three elements which in my role, I have to be really prepared to be strong on the message to the players. He says, when the player is 26 plus with a big salary and he's not performing, he's killing you. That kind of player because you don't have the valuation to sell the player. The player is comfortable. Arsenal, London, beautiful. Everything is fantastic and a good salary. How do you move this player? So, how many players with that kind of characteristic did we have in the past? 80% of the squad. That's why I said to the board when I made my plan, guys, it's not easy to clean the squad straight away because most of those players have 2, 3, 4 year contracts. We need a strategy. We need to try to change things. I mean, that's probably been one of the biggest features of this new regime coming in is not being able to shift these players, and then I do think people forget that the pandemic had a huge part to play in that. Clubs not having money, they don't want to buy your players and stuff like that. When he kind of talked about the people being comfortable and, players being comfortable and things like that. Do you kind of, look at the players that we had before and think that they kind of were settled and just going through the motions and, they weren't really giving 100% and that's why it made it really difficult on top of the fact that they had the salaries, because I do look at the players that we had in the past and think I didn't even like some of those players because they didn't feel like Arsenal players, right? Do you think that it was like the comfort and all that kind of stuff? Did you see that too?
Yeah, 100%. I don't know why, I don't know who's to blame for that, but it did seem to be a place people come to just sort of put their feet up and just relax. There was no
Yeah.
expectation from the club. I mean, obviously the fans started to turn and the whole Wenger out and everything happened but it just seemed to be too relaxed. I mean, even from Gazidis, everyone wanted Gazidis gone. It was a really toxic place and we can clearly see why that was, and players getting contracts they should never have gotten,
Mhm.
wages they should never have gotten. Like I know. Obviously, Özil started the Özil and the Aubameyang situation, and it kind of just spiraled. I mean, our wage structure was really shocking to see. Like Mustafi on like over 100k, Kolasinac over 100k. You know, all
Yeah.
our deadwood players were on over 100,000 per week, and it was like impossible to get rid. Like you had to. I mean, I don't blame them for terminating contracts because otherwise, how else are you going to get rid of them? So
Yeah.
it's difficult because who wants Bellerin? Like, if we're being honest, like no one wants to pay for Bellerin. No one wants to pay for Ainsley. Mostly because things they've done. Like even with Guendouzi, I know a lot of people said we've let him go for on the cheap and everything, but when you see situations and attitudes from other clubs, there's not a lot of bias for that anymore. People do want professionals, and if you are gonna be a dick, right, you've got to be one of the best in the world. You've got to be Mbappe, Messi, Neymar, Ronaldo level to have that arrogance. And if not, there's not a market for. I mean, look at Ronaldo now. He's struggling. Why? Because the perception of Ronaldo right now isn't great because the media's painting them out to be the United villain. So when clubs are looking at it, it's like, do we want that character around our club? Like, I'm not look.
Yeah.
This is just speculating. I'm just saying I don't know what the actual reason is, or if he actually even wants to move. But perception is everything in football, and if the perception is he's going to be hard work, they're not going to pay over a certain amount for a player. So that that's also part of it
Yeah.
as much as they're comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like the environment of Arsenal, like, you know, I think about the there's like a story out there, that like when Oxlade-Chamberlain left Arsenal and went to Liverpool, that the Liverpool players stopped him at the door and said, "Don't bring your Arsenal mentality here." You
Mm.
know, that even Willian said, like, he felt the difference between Chelsea and Arsenal, like, the moment that he stepped in to training. And I do think that level of complacency was really kind of there from the end of the Wenger era and kinda just continued on with Unai Emery because he didn't really have a grip on things. So you bring those players in, then they expect then we go back to the conversation about, Adu saying, he wanted to have players that only wanted to play for Arsenal. If they didn't really want to be there and they were just kind of like, cool, Arsenal, big club, they're asking for big contracts, you just give them. I don't know if people remember this person, but his name was Hasfami. He was a terrible contract negotiator. He was one of the ones that put them on all those big contracts. And so you have like this cocktail of bad decisions that have just kind of created this perfect storm in a way, for these players to exist on these high contracts and not actually be good enough to play for Arsenal. And then you have the bad recruitment, on top of that. And so, there's several different factors, but I'm sure most of those players had at least two of not good enough, high salary, not a great attitude. Like they had two of at least like two of those at least. And so you look at those situations and it's just like, damn, we really were in a bad position, but then I also look at it and I say, okay, as much as I do agree with what you're saying, Adu, you brought in Willian, you put a bombing on the next contract that was big. We also, Pablo Marie is on too big of money for a player of his stature, so they did some things on their own to exacerbate an already bad situation. But the difference between Adu and his team and Raul and whoever came before them is that they fail fast. When things don't work out, they cut it out quick. And that's essentially what you've seen with Willian and Aubameyang. He said, if you imagine, oh, no problem, this season we're going to expose the player a little bit more and then we sell them. No, be realistic. You don't want to sell the player, but you have to. Try to avoid one more year with the problem inside, in the dressing room. Expensive, not performing, clean, take it out. Even, I'm sorry if you have to pay. To leave is better because that guy is sometimes also blocking someone. Take it out. I know it hurts. I know it's strange when I go to the board and say, sometimes it's better to pay the player to leave than maintain them. but I consider it an investment. Sometimes people say it's expensive. I say no, it's investment. But someone will pay if you sell. No, guys, if the player is above 26, 27 and not performing, big salary, no chance. And we've seen this. Like, we've seen this with Adu, that there's been a big kind of like, I guess, like, criticism of him not being able to sell these players and get big fees. But, when he puts it that way, it's kind of, and you look at also like United, you look at Chelsea as well, who have some players that are in that age range, 26, 27, 28, 29, not performing. They can't get rid of them. Do we think we need to maybe keep that in our minds when we're having these high expectations of how much money we're going to make from outgoings when you look at it that way? Because I have to be honest, I don't really see other teams being able to sell these types of players as well. I don't. Because the key there is 26, 27, big salary, not performing. That's a big part of it. If they're not good, nobody's going to want them, right? And so do you think we have to kind of take that into consideration when we have these lofty expectations of what we should make from sales? I mean, Bernd Leno wasn't particularly not performing, but even he's hard to shift because of his salary.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite interesting. I think it was Adam Vogue who actually done like a little TikTok thing, and he's, I think, the 13th highest paid goalkeeper or something, and obviously that's going to be hard for anyone to take on because, for example, Fulham, who are seemingly the front runners to sign him, um, he'd easily by at least double becomes their highest paid player. So when you look at certain clubs, it's very difficult to shift players on, and especially when they're on, like for example, Aubameyang, like he's on about 250 to 350,000, depending on what you listen to. Now no one wants to pick because that's what a De Bruyne is getting paid, for example, who's like performing week in week out. Granted, Aubameyang has his ability, but he's not shown it for nearly 2 seasons. So, do you take that risk, especially when he's 30 plus? So I kind of agree, and I get the idea of it's an investment because if they're becoming trouble in the back room and they're sort of rubbing off on other players, and other players are now thinking it's fine to behave a certain way, then you have to cut it out, and you have to basically remove the toxicity from the group, really, to keep the competitive high. And yeah, to be honest, like when you actually listen to what he says, it all makes sense. Like we're not saying we're selling a Saka, for example, who's young, a promising talent. That's where you can be like, okay, if we're not getting like 80 million, for example, you're probably doing yourself an injustice. Or let's say we're selling an ESR or someone that's not clearly deadwood. Like the problem is the players that we wanted to get rid of were clear deadwood, and that's also a problem. Like they know we wanted to get rid of Aubameyang, hence why we couldn't really get a fee, and they just agreed to mutually terminate the contract, which means we didn't pay anything, and he just made his move to Barcelona, and all of that was done for free. So even with the Lacazette situation, it was difficult to shift him for any less than what it would cost us to replace him. Like they only wanted to pay 10 million. We may as well keep him and just let him go on a free because he's worth more than 10 million, in terms of a player for us. So it's always difficult. And I think now is where, like, once Ainsley goes and like Pablo Mari goes, I expect money for players because if
See,
you're selling,
that's what I
yeah,
was going to ask you. Like, when do we switch over from this to, okay, we need you to, actually start to recoup some fees, for these players, because some of them don't actually fit in that category. And when you look at, like, we talked about this morning, could have sold Ainsley for 15 million, right? To Wolves before. There was a time where Barcelona was offering us 25 million for Hector Bellerin. So some of these, again, are situations that it feels like we've almost exacerbated by not actually triggering when it was time. I understand these guys. I understand canceling these contracts on the screen. Socrates, Mustafi, Kolasinac, Mkhitaryan, Ozil, Bamiyang. But moving forward, how do we get to that next step, of actually recouping the fees? And do you think that us continuing to canceling contracts is damaging the perception of the club, like, and how we sell, because that could have long-term ramifications, right? If we don't start to change that around. What do you think about that?
100. I think now we can't do it. If I kind of said it in the chat, and I was a bit jokey and a bit serious. If the club doesn't want to pay what they want to pay and they expect us to terminate contracts, well, guess what? They can just sit and rot on the bench, because we need to stop doing it, because now teams are expecting us, if the negotiations get hard per se, that we're just gonna rip the contract. So it's becoming a joke. Like Torreira, like Fiorentina, especially, like that situation is when my mindset changed. And I was like, that's it, don't do it, because these clubs are now making it so the situation is you either terminate the contract or we don't buy, and they're buying every other player in the world. And I'm like, nah. So we need to, because to change that perception, you have to dig your heels in. Look at PSG and the Mbappe situation. They, granted, I don't want to go that overboard and just start giving the club away basically to a player, but
Yeah.
they wanted to keep Mbappe and they said, okay, this is what we'll do. And they didn't allow him to go for free. That's basically what they're preventing, is trying to secure his future value. And that's what we need to do. We need to start making sure that if someone, like, for example, let's take the Fiorentina Torreira situation, just say to them, all right, then if you don't want to pay, cool, we'll keep the player. And that will then slowly change the perspective and actually just make a lie up and just get him on a contract. So even if Fiorentina were like, he'll be free next year, we'll just come in next season, just try and sign him on to another year or something. Start putting options of extensions, just so if you want to fuck us around, we'll fuck you around as well. And that's what the big teams do. Hence why Liverpool can get all these bizarre fees for players that we've never heard of. And like Man City seem to have a balanced book, regardless of how much deadwood they're selling. Like, they'll keep their value because and also it's a perception of how the club is doing. Now that there seems to be a buzz, players want to be here, they want to play for Arsenal, and obviously now the results need to match. So let's say we start competing for the title. Now, clubs are going to look in and go, we're going to have to pay something, or we're going to have to maybe pay 10 million more for a player, because why would they leave a setup that's so promising? So it's a bit of both. It's stop tearing contracts, but also start performing.
Yeah, it's one of those where there has to be a line, but when I look at it, I think this is the window. We'll get rid of most of our deadwood. Like, if we'll probably end up canceling contracts for Hector Bellerin and Nicola Pepe. I think they fall within that category of not performing, 26, 27 years old, high salary. I think they both fall within that. So you'll probably end up taking nothing or just getting rid, you know. So there you go. Papa Marie looks like he's on his way out. Torreira will have to figure out something for, but I'm sure he'll go as well. 1 year left on his deal, as well as Ainsley. All these guys have 1 year left. So it's either recoup now or let him go. So I think decisions will be made on a lot of these players. And then from the rest of the group are players that are Arteta's people. So I think one of the things I'd like to see from Arteta moving forward in the club in general is when they don't want a player to be here, which I understand that it was difficult to do in the beginning, was don't act like you're desperate to get rid of them. When you want to sell, you want to make it seem like it's a good commodity, something that somebody else would want. And sell before it's obvious to sell. One of the smartest things I've ever heard Elliot say from the Arsenal Vision podcast is if it's obvious you should sell, it's too late. You should sell before that. And I think that's why the Willock sale worked out. We gave him a good loan. We sold him when he was scoring all those goals. And then bam, he never was the same, but we were laughing with that 25 million. And I think we're going to have a couple of decisions to make moving forward similarly, where maybe we should sell before it's obvious and it won't hurt us as much when it becomes more obvious. So, you weren't on the show earlier, but I said, Tierney, that conversation is probably coming up for him. Beyond next summer, it's going to become really difficult to move him on if he continues to have these injuries. So, it might not be something that the fans want to hear, but maybe there's a conversation to have about him before it becomes super obvious, because we're getting there. And even like somebody like my example was Emil Smith Rowe, not somebody that I feel like we have to, but if we keep bringing in creative players and he doesn't nail down a position, and he remains to be somebody that doesn't stay fit, if an Aston Villa or one of these types of clubs comes in for 35, 40 million for him, maybe you consider it before it becomes obvious. So that's definitely something that I want to see moving forward. But I can kind of understand why we haven't seen that up until this point, because we really haven't had any good assets. Like, some of these players have been so dead, so I kind of understand that. But even Hightower says like 25 million for Willock was mad. And I think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that, like, we sold before it was obvious. There was a lot of Arsenal fans that felt like, oh, he's scoring goals now, bring him back in. Why are we buying Odegaard? This guy scores goals. We have not missed Willock. I don't think anybody has said like we should have kept Willock, right? Like, does anybody think we should have kept Willock?
Yeah, people wanted him, but
yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those where I do think that, like, we just need to think about for the future, which I'm okay with. There's almost 300 of you guys in here. Where were you guys at the beginning? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, So this is I thought this was one of my favorite parts, was when he was talking about the winning mentality. And Adu said, like, if we got Champions League last season, we would have advanced 1 year ahead in the project. He says, in those kinds of moments, we're going to play an important game. Pressure, we have to win the game to be in the Champions League. You need a squad with, I want to kill someone, I'm not saying we don't have a good squad, but we need a bigger squad with personalities, with some behaviors that say, I don't want to lose the game. I will kill someone, but I don't lose the game. I thought that this was like such a good point, because he made the obvious point that these players are good. Gabriel, Saka, Martinelli, ESR, like all these players, so good players. But we did lack that personality and that winning mentality. And I think sometimes that comes from winning, and being in winning environments. And one of the things I've really advocated for is to bring in players that have been there and done that, so that they can learn from them. You can't learn from each other, because none of you guys have won anything. And without Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko, how many of those players have actually won anything significant? I think Thomas Partey is the only one that's won anything, really. Can you think of anybody else? I don't think so. None, really.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
It's wild. They haven't really won anything, not like a Premier League or a Champions League, and those are the things that we're looking towards. So I'm not thinking about like the odd youth cup or anything like that. I'm saying like won a league or won the Champions League or something significant. And there's really nobody in. I mean, Ben White won the championship with Leeds, but that's different. We're talking about like actually winning something significant. And so I think the young players really needed that. And I think Edu made such a good point, with that. When you look at, Tierney, he's won stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He has won things. So thank you for saying that. So yeah, and like, of course, Edu would know, because he won stuff with Arsenal and he's pretty successful and things like that. When you look at not this team, but the team prior, the team that lost in Baku, in for an example, do you think that's something that they lacked, was that winning mentality, that I will kill you to win? You think that was something that really held that team back, that this team needs to have in order to move to the next level?
100%. I mean, just the whole, like, the way the team looked on the pitch, they just didn't care. Like, there was no, I can't really sit here and say one player on that pitch cared about what that result looked like.
Oh, and also, can I say something really quick? Because I see people saying they lack talent. That same team beat Chelsea twice that season. That Chelsea team finished 10th that year, I think.
Yeah.
They didn't. They didn't finish 10th. No, they got top. Yeah, they got top 4, but we beat them twice already that season. So to say that they lack talent, it clearly wasn't the talent. We beat that team before, right? Continue.
I know that team had talent, or enough talent to be able to at least give them a game.
Yeah,
And we can't even sit here and say inexperienced manager because Emery's won it more than probably any manager in the modern game. So
exactly.
it was just the fact that I don't think anyone really cared about Arsenal as much as we thought they did. And
Mhm.
they didn't turn up, and that's the problem. And it's one of our big, like, arguably one of our biggest games in the history of Arsenal, like winning a European trophy. Granted, it's Europa League and it's not the Champions League, but it's against Chelsea, and you've got to be able to sit there and you know be up for the games like that. And we've missed
Yeah.
that when we've always said it. We don't have a captain, we don't have this, and we don't have a leader, we don't have someone to look to when we're losing a game. And I still think even last season, some point in the season, that's what we were missing. And I feel we've somewhat started to bring, at least the personalities have grown into those roles. So
Mhm.
yeah, like Martinelli, seems to be like one of those guys who wants to win at all costs. Saka seems to be getting in there. We're seeing, like, I mean, All or Nothing will show us what Arteta's like in a losing situation. I mean, we've seen the trailer, but that's one snippet, so I don't want to sit here and say that's what he's like all the time. But he seems to be like that. Edu will definitely be like that because he doesn't come from a losing career. He comes from a very credible and very successful footballing career. So he'll know what it means. So it's one of those where those characters weren't there. We're thinking about who's been in those dressing rooms where they've won things. And it is hard to really name players like Zinchenko and Jesus. You can count them out because they've only just come in. Thomas Partey and Kieran Tierney, that's it. That's all we had to reference like what a winner looks like. So, and then also with Tierney, it's a bit like, well, you can't even reference him or Partey because they've been out for a lot of the season. So who's the winner? Who's there when they're not there? So at least we're bringing that in and bringing those mixed personalities who have, like, with Jesus, he's just done it. Like, he's literally coming off a Premier League winning season. He's won the FA Cup, he's won the Carabao Cup, he's been to the finals of the Champions League, whether he's played in them or not. He's been there and
Mhm.
he's been in that environment, and he knows what it means, and he'll know the right way to motivate a player. He won't just sit there and go, "I'm gonna kill you." Like, if that doesn't work for a player, he's gonna know, okay, this sort of personality needs this sort of motivation. This player needs this sort of motivation. So they'll have the experience of different types of players and how they react. And that's vital and that's important as well. So I think it's only good that we're starting to build that personality into the team.
Yeah, I mean, I when you look at the best teams in the league, they have those winning personalities. They have those players that drag them over the line in difficult situations. And I think the best example of that, I know City are amazing. They're like a freaking machine. But, I look at Liverpool the most. I look at their team and I think there's a lot of leaders in there in different ways. Like, obviously, Jordan Henderson is like the captain, the guy. But I also see players like even Mane, like, well, before he left, kind of like dragging the team by what he was doing on the field, like actually doing it. Virgil van Dijk, obviously, great leader as well. Like, everybody kind of had a little bit of that edge to him. And I do think we've lacked that personality. We definitely didn't have winners in our team. We had a bunch of whiners. And to be like, when I think about that team that went to Baku, to be 90 minutes away from Champions League football and knowing that your opposition didn't actually need it, to go out there and show your ass the way that they did, it just is something that just reeks. And so, you know, I think this team definitely needs some of that winning mentality. And Edu talked about, obviously Gabriel Jesus coming in, like you said, and Zinchenko, and those two have been in winning environments, so they understand what it takes. And even he mentioned Vieira, who's won, the Portuguese league with Porto, I think he
Oh
said,
yeah, yeah.
so he also has some of that. So I think we still need maybe one or two more, to really just round it out, to really push it. But I would also expect players like Gabrielle, White, them to step up as well. They've been around long enough in at least the Premier League to do something. And so it's going to be interesting to see like how the team shifts, because this team was the burden was really on the young players, and I would like to see it shift to an older group. moving forward. Um, then he also talked about, Adu, like talking about winning titles. And he said a club like Arsenal at our size is not building to be fighting for top four. I'm sorry. We have to be realistic. There's City, Liverpool, etc. That's fine. I accept that. But also, you cannot accept that here when you join the club, when you see the size, we cannot accept it. That's why I was really hurt when I arrived and I said, that's not the mentality of this football club. What's happening? Everybody's comfortable, everybody's okay, F you, okay. No, I don't want to lose games. We have to be there again. And so, I thought that part really hit me in my chest. I was like, yes, y'all were comfortable and we could feel it. And winning titles is important, but do you feel like that's kind of like the difficult part of Arsenal at the minute, especially when it comes to like online discourse and the fan base, is that it's difficult for the fan base to balance the reality of where we are and where we've been in order to make realistic expectations for current seasons. Obviously we need to strive for titles, but top four would be a success for this group at the moment. And wanting top four doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you want to be forever. Do you think that that's kind of the difficulty at the moment, is balancing that, where we've been and where we are now, and finding the balance to make realistic expectations?
And the problem is, we've been in this sort of mess for far too long. You can't change these things overnight. And like, one of the prime examples is we're now seeing the other side of it whilst we're looking at United, for example, where for about, since Fergie's left, so about 8 years, 8 seasons, or maybe 9 seasons, they've had this sort of rotating managers and no real structure, no real plan, no real sort of, what are we doing as a football club? How are we going to get back to what Fergie built? And, they're trying to find themselves again. And I feel like we need to look at that and go, that's what we were. We did it for 18 years under Wenger, where things got comfortable, things got complacent, and we're trying to find the Arsenal, which a lot of people grew up watching. I only watched it like in highlights and sort of what people have told me, but even the Invincibles, for example, the 02 season, like winning doubles, winning Premier Leagues, competing for them, and even competing in the Champions League as well, like getting further on into the semi-finals, finals, and that's what Arsenal's built on. The foundations of Arsenal is built on high success, or at least competing at a very high level. And we've seen that competitiveness sort of drop off, and that's from ownership all the way down to sort of players, to just the staff and the fans around the stadium, just accepting things season on season. Obviously, until the whole Wenger out protest started happening, that's when I feel the fans had enough. But what we needed to, I always said it to people, even at that time ago, we need to then be patient with what happens next, because this isn't going to just turn around. This isn't going to happen where you bring a top manager and all of a sudden things change. Like, we've got players who shouldn't be here. We've got players who don't want to be here. Forget about ability. And that's what we're doing. We're building a culture, and that's the expectations you've got to have. And I feel like when people say we've lowered our expectations, I don't think that's the case. I think some people have come to the realization of how what you need to expect for the project to move forward. And if you're going to sit there and go, if we don't win the league, you've got to sack the manager, well, guess what? You're going to have this for another 20, 30, 40 seasons. If they don't succeed, you fire them. Like, imagine City did that. They wouldn't have Pep Guardiola today because he came third in his first season. So you have to be real with what you have and then go off of that. Now, of course, he's spent enough money to now be... What I've said it, like, whatever avenue he gets it, he has to get Champions League. If he doesn't, then serious talks need to be had. That, what more do you need? Because I don't know, like, because there seems to be 2 more players coming in at a minimum, it seems. So if we look at that, that's what we've said we need to really go for a top 4 or win the Europa League. And if that doesn't happen, then we're not lowering our standards. We're just being real that you need to now get Champions League. You've said it yourself. Like Edu said, we're 1 year, behind, like, not 1 year, but we're on schedule, but we would have been a year ahead if we had got Champions. So that means this season is Champions
This is
League
the
football.
season where they
Yeah.
expected it. Exactly. And, when I look at it, I think they've definitely pushed out of the comfort zone because I do feel like when you go out and you get a Gabriel Jesus, you get a Zinchenko, you have to convince them that their career is not going to backslide. They could have went and got a Dominic Calvert-Lewin. They could have went out and got a Aaron Hickey and just continued on with, Project U slash, just want to be in and around, Europa League is cool kind of spot. But they went out and they got two players that are going to expect for Arsenal to push on. They're going to give 110% to make it happen, but they're going to have expectations. Saka is going to have expectations. It's just going to be different. Also, like, some of our best players are getting looks from really good teams. So it's one of those where I'm really happy to see that we pushed the boat out and we didn't just do the easy thing. We could have said, oh, we're in Europa League, so we're going to go after Europa League talent. We went out and we got two players, even maybe you could count Vieira in this, that are Champions League level quality, you know? And so I do like that, but it puts more pressure on the project to get done. It puts more pressure on it. And so there's going to be an expectation. I think everybody feels it. I think the players are going to feel it. I think Arteta's going to feel it. The fans feel it, that this is a very big year, big season for Arsenal. And Champions League is definitely the expectation. I think we'll have many conversations about what does improving look like, because if every single team improves and we also improve, but we finish fifth, does that mean that we failed? I feel like that's the conversation that we're going to be having. Because really what we're hoping is that we get better and other teams above us get crappier, right? Because there's probably going to be 6 or 7 teams that are good enough to play in Champions League, but only 4 make it. So it's going to be hard. That's why watching Chelsea look the way that they looked was like, is it going to be you? Are you going to be the crap? Are you going to be the one? Slips and slides? Is it you? Because we're going to need a little help, but we're going to have many conversations about that. The last thing that I wanted to touch on was that he spoke about a player that was at Dortmund that they spoke, and he tried to, talk about the project and talk to the family and all that kind of stuff. And all the agent wanted to talk about was the money. Who do you think that player was? Let's speculate. I have an idea who I think it is.
It's impossible. Like, it's so hard to like pinpoint. Because I mean,
you gotta guess.
I've got a logical reason for this player because he was linked at the time, and it's Julian Brandt. Because if we're going from a timeline perspective, he was the only. Well, again, links don't always mean anything, but you know what? Right? Okay, I'm gonna say this. I don't believe it's Jude Bellingham, and I'll tell you why. Because Liverpool are the same as us. They have a similar mentality because they wouldn't want a player to come for money either, and they're very much so the Klopp project, and you're coming in to play for Liverpool. So the only player that I'd believe is if City were in for him. Nah, I don't think. I think Brandt's my guess. That's my guess.
Yeah, I mean that's so.
Yeah, because he's another name. Akanji is like everyone's saying Akanji, but that we've never been linked to him unless I'm missing something.
We've been lightly linked to him in the past, but yeah, like now that people are saying Jude, it's so funny because it may have been. I mean, the thing is like, we know that we tried to sign him from Birmingham, before he went to Dortmund, but something tells me like it was probably Julian Brandt. That's where the timeline kind of aligns with wanting, because we wanted Odegaard and Brandt, and Brandt was involved, and then we went with Odegaard. So for me, I think it was probably him, potentially. Jude, I don't know. I'm not sure, and Jude Bellingham is a monster personality, a 100% winner, so I don't think that his entourage would be talking about money. They'd be talking about, well, what are you going to win? Where are you going? Who are you going to buy? I don't necessarily feel like that would be his energy, but Brandt, potentially, yeah.
Yeah, but Bellingham doesn't need to demand money. He's going to get it. That's the difference. Whereas with Brandt, he's probably not getting money, like not in a rude way, but like if you're looking at Bellingham, you know, like okay, City will be in for him, Liverpool will be in for him, potentially
Yeah.
Bayern Munich will be in for him. You know, some of the big clubs. If you find out, okay, Arsenal, let's go with a hypothetical here. Let's say Arsenal come in, they bid 80 million or whatever, you know, and it gets
Mhm.
accepted, and then we start talking to Bellingham. You know, Bayern Munich are going to put their hands in there and go, okay, so 80 million's a fee, right? Okay, we'll pay that. City will pay that. Liverpool will pay that. So then what happens is his contract's going to be negotiated to a stupid amount anyway. But with Brandt, who else is going in for him? So his agents are more than likely going to be talking, okay, what's the money going to be? Because I don't think I don't know. I just don't think it can be Bellingham. Because I don't think the agents need to talk. Because I just think he gets what he gets given. Like, he's gonna get stupid money regardless of whether the agent talks about it or not.
Yeah, it's such is I just wanted to speculate a little bit, because I was just like, who could that have been? But ultimately, like, yeah, if they're not interested in the project and they're just like, yeah, what's the money looking like? Then yeah, we don't need to be,
That's old
talking to
Arsenal.
them. Yeah, that's definitely the old Arsenal. Matt Bang says, so if we don't reach our goals and get top four or win Europa League, then I believe we should try a different approach with a different manager. My thoughts on this are that we have every opportunity next season with the direction that we're going in to make the Champions League. But it's going to be like fine margins, like it was this past season. It's going to be fine margins, and sometimes it's about talent, sometimes it's about luck. Sometimes the difference between a couple of points could be the manager. And so when we've improved the squad and it's a Champions League level squad, the environment's good, the mentality is good, we've kind of done everything that we need to do, but we're still not getting there. The only other thing you can really look at is, could we have gotten another 3 points here, there, if we had had a different manager? So I do think that you have to look at how you can increase those margins, if we don't make our um our benchmarks, but I'm kind of this season backing Arteta to get it done this time around. I really want to see him get it done. I'm not one of these types. I may have my feelings about Arteta, like maybe feeling like he's not gonna, maybe he's not the guy or whatever, but ultimately I'd prefer him to be, because he's built all this and everything that he's wanted to do. Everything has sounded really good. I just always had questions around whether or not he had the capacity to get it done, because it's such a big job. But if he could do it, that would be such a huge feat from where we came from. And I do think people forget how disjointed this club was, but when he came in,
Mhm.
you know.
Because now we've got supporter clubs who have meetings well, whether it's with Josh every week or every month, but they definitely have meetings with like Vinay and Edu and all of that, which is something that's been introduced since he's come in. Now they've got the I've forgotten the group name, but they've got that fan group that do all the in stadium atmosphere stuff, and it seems like the club are well supportive of it, and so. Do you know what? I hate this question because I don't want to get rid of Arteta. If people want to know my truthful answer, I don't want to fire him, and I'll tell you why. Because if the environment's good, if the players are up for it, for me it's very difficult to say that, yeah, just get rid of the money, because you can have the adverse effect of that. You could be like, well, all these players are going to be there, like, well, what the hell? Like, we're building something, and you're now tearing this down because what we didn't. Because it can have a damaging effect as much as it can have a good effect. But for me, expectations change, because we could just now start competing for the title. But then do we sit there and say that's an overachievement? Yes, from the start of the season. But going into it, let's say we had that Leicester Arsenal, when we finished second and Leicester won the league. If we had a situation like that where every other team just dropped off some reason, then it's not really an overachievement. It's just we've achieved what we needed to. So it's difficult. Things change during the season. So the thing is, with the players we brought in, a lot of those games we lost, we should be drawing at least, and some of them
Mhm.
will turn into wins naturally. And we've also got to look at this is a World Cup season. Now it's in the winter. So what effects will that have? Not saying will have negative, but it could have negative effects for for City, Liverpool, Chelsea, United, for ourselves as well, Spurs,
Mhm.
because they're going to have heavy involvement. So a lot of our players are going to the World Cup, you know, and our injured players are going as well because Partey's qualified, so he's going to be playing in the World Cup. So it's going to be very difficult to really assess the season because it's another odd season where the World Cup happens during the season and at the pinnacle of the season because it's between November and December, isn't it? Like it kind of falls into that bracket, which is when games usually are thick and like they come one after the other, and it's the most challenging part. So I think it'll be interesting, but it's so I hate that question. Like, would you get rid of him if he doesn't get top
Yeah.
four? Because it's impossible.
It's it's just um it's just a difficult question to answer because top 4 is something that, like, again, we could have improved a lot and still not make top 4 because everybody else got better as well. So, I know that's, like, a not what people wanna hear. I want top 4, like, I feel like he has enough to get us there, and if he's the manager that they told us that he was, which is, like, this kind of, like, innovative young manager ahead of the curve, I think he should be the difference. He should be the difference. I do think Conte was the difference in the last race. Arteta kinda needs to be the difference this time. So, yeah, we will end it there. There's 300 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Again, if you're just getting in here, just go ahead and rewind. We went through all of the big points in Adu's interview, um, from top to bottom. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you guys want more of like the transfer chat, I did do a daily download earlier today, and I talked about Tielemans, Cody Gakpo, Bellerin, Pablo Marie, everybody. So if you want more of that conversation, please, touch on that. But yeah, make sure you guys follow Sulz on Twitter at Gooner Sulz. What do you have going on these days? What are you up to?
I'll be back uploading. I was just enjoying the weather whilst it was actually hot. So yeah, no, I'll be back some point this week. And I'll probably do a lot more Arsenal content. I have done a bit of Barcelona to explain their situation, and that was fun because a lot of people disagreed, but now people are coming around to the idea. But yeah, so I'll be doing that, and obviously we've got the Chelsea game coming up, so I'll be speaking on. Oh no, sorry, the Sevilla game, which is going to be our first real test, and yeah, so you can come and goodness. So just follow me on Twitter and you'll know everything that's going on.
Perfect. Make sure you guys follow him, and you can follow me on Twitter at JustKnowTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. See you guys tomorrow.